and welcome to Lovecraft in the Bath with me, VEELA. Thank you so much for joining me. Today, I'm going to be talking about the Statement of Randolf Carter, which is the second story in this Penguin Classics compilation by S.T. Joshi. This video contains tons of spoilers, so if you have not read it, please go read the Statement of Randolf Carter either as a free text version online or as an audiobook. I've attached my link to my narration and another one if you want to hear it from a male voice instead, which would be a little more cohesive with the story. This story is very short. The horror element in it isn't as much about the big reveal at the end. It's more about the setting and the words used. Some of these description words are so beautiful that you can't help but wanting to reread it one more time. This story is basically a man trying to explain what happened to either doctors at a mental hospital or some sort of hospital police, what had happened to him and his friend, because his friend is no longer here. He's dead and they're trying to figure out why. So the story is him trying to recollect everything from his memory that's failing him a little bit about what happened that night. In the explanatory notes at the back of this story, S.T. Joshi tells us that it is well known that this story is, or was claimed by Lovecraft to be, an almost literal transcript of a dream Lovecraft had, probably in early December 1919, in which he and Samuel Loveman make a fateful trip to an ancient cemetery, and Loveman suffers some horrible but mysterious fate after he descends alone into a crypt. It's fun to know that all kinds of artists have inspiration from their dreams. A lot of my songs I pull direct inspiration from my dreams too. Maybe that's what happens when you run out of ideas. So the beginning of this story, Randolf Carter, who's the man speaking, he says that he swears he can't remember most of what had happened, but that everything he's saying is true. And it's the most he can remember from his knowledge. He says that most of his memory is wiped out, so he's trying to explain as best he can. And then he talks about his friend who's disappeared. He says, "Again, I say, I do not know what has become of Harley Warren, though I think, almost hope, that he is in peaceful oblivion, if there be anywhere so blessed a thing." So clearly something really shitty just happened. Then he goes on to explain that he's been friends with him for almost 5 years, his closest friend, and that they've been doing all kinds of research into the occult and the unknown and all these scary things. He kind of hints that his friend Harley Warren carried around a forbidden book with forbidden secrets, which may or may not be the infamous Necronomicon, but that's never told in the story. It just kind of says there's a book he carries around, there's horrible things in it, and he would never tell him what was inside. Randolph Carter explains that all he can remember is one specific scene from the night where Harley Warren disappeared. He says, "Vision or nightmare it may have been. Vision or nightmare I fervently hope it was. Yet it is all that my mind retains of what took place in those shocking hours after we left the sight of men." He then explains how Warren was a man of iron will and he was never afraid of anything, and he often would convince Randolph to do things that he otherwise would not because he was a nervous man. And he explained how he was almost afraid of Warren because of those qualities. But then he says, "But I do not fear him now, for I suspect that he has known horrors beyond my ken. Now I fear for him." Now, the police or the hospital, they have a witness who said that they were out at a certain time at night and that he saw them. And Randolph Carter goes, "Well, he's probably right, but I can't remember, like I told you a million times." He says that all he remembers is this. He remembers them going to a tomb in an ancient cemetery very late at night. And he explains that the cemetery was so dark and scary, and he felt like there hadn't been anybody living there for so many years. It felt wrong to be there. He says, "On every hand were signs of neglect and decrepitude, and I seemed haunted by the notion that Warren and I were the first living creatures to invade a lethal silence of centuries. He also goes on to call it a terrible necropolis, which is great. He remembers going to a certain location with Warren and starting to dig. Once they dig low enough, they open this big tomb. Warren didn't want him to come with him down in the tomb because he was too nervous and he was too scared, and he felt responsible for him. He didn't want a man with weak nerves to come down into the tomb because of the terrible things that lie beneath. Randolph explains how he tried to tell him he wanted to go too, but in the end he threatened not to go down at all if he wouldn't let him go along. Warren had a very long line with a telephone at the end, like almost like a walkie-talkie, that he would bring with him down, and he would explain every word of what was going on. And this seemed to be enough for Randall. He says, "I promise to keep you informed over the telephone of every move. You see, I've enough wire here to reach to the center of the earth and back." Randolph explains that he doesn't remember what they were going down to see or what they would investigate, but he knows that Warren had the book with him and he was going to investigate something deep in the tomb, and he seemed to know what he was going to see. So Warren shakes Randolph's hand and he starts going down. Randolph is extremely nervous. He's waiting by the telephone in the dead of night and in this disgusting ancient cemetery. Oh, by the way, I forgot to say that in here somewhere it says, "The place filled me with a vague stench which my idle fancy associated absurdly with rotting stone." Does that not put a picture in your brain? Rotting stone? Okay. So Randolph is waiting, okay, for his friend Warren to tell him something from the telephone. All of a sudden, he hears a little bit of clicking. And he goes and listens really close, and here's what we read. "Warren, who had so calmly left me a little while previously, now called from below in a shaky whisper, more portentous than the loudest shriek. God, if you could see what I am seeing." I could not answer, speechless. I could only wait. Then came the frenzied tones again. "Carter, it's terrible, monstrous, unbelievable." And then Randolph starts to say, "What is it? What is it? What's going on?" And then Warren goes, "I can't tell you, Carter. It's too utterly beyond thought. I dare not tell you. No man could know it and live. Great God, I never dreamed of this." And then it goes still for a while. And then Warren begins pleading with Randolph to close the tomb door and to run for his life. These pleas go on and get increasingly more fervent as the time goes on, and Randolph doesn't know what to do. He goes, "Well, I don't want to leave my friend, but at the same time he doesn't want to completely disobey and make a big mistake maybe." And then after the pleading, he becomes a little more resigned and he says, "Nearly over now. Don't make it harder. Cover up those damn steps and run for your life. You're losing time. So long, Carter. Won't see you again." Here, Warren's whisper swelled into a cry that gradually rose to a shriek fraught with the horror of ages. "Curse these hellish things! Legions, my God! Beat it! Beat it! Beat it!" And then it's silence. And Randolph explains how he waited, and he was so scared. For so long he kept yelling and yelling, "Warren, Warren, are you there? Are you there?" And he waited by the phone for a very long time. This story ends with the best cliffhanger. Randolph is shell-shocked, and he's sitting by the tomb, still by the telephone, not knowing what to do, when out of the blue comes that clicking again. And he goes, "Warren, Warren, is that you?" But the only thing that comes up goes like this. "I heard it well up from the innermost depths of that damnable open sepulchre as I watched amorphous, necrophagous shadows dance beneath an accursed wandering moon." And this is what it said. "You fool, Warren is dead." That's the end of the story. It's short and sweet, man. It's just the most beautiful agglomeration of explanation of the landscape and kind of that campy horror vibe that I just love. I hope that an image of rotting stone sticks in your head for a little bit. I'll see you again soon.